All right. So in these uh, morning meditation sessions we're going to have this week, what I basically want to do is practice self-inquiry and or surrender with you all. And we'll be just doing practice, talk about it, practice, talk about it. That's basically the whole structure of it. So let's start with self-inquiry. I just want to renew the instructions, and we'll as you do it and you talk about it, questions will come up and we'll clarify and clarify and clarify. So one more time, basically the aim of both practices, both self-inquiry and surrender, is we're trying to maintain them at all times, at all waking moments, really, I should say. That's the aim. And self-inquiry is really trying to find the obvious, right? There's a very obvious sense that we have that we exist. We seem to know this without a doubt. It seems so intimate, so clear. It's like the primary thing upon which everything else is based. And what we are trying to do in the self-inquiry exercise is locate what this sense of ourselves is. We're trying to turn our attention towards it, just like we would turn our attention towards anything else. If we say focus on something, focus on this book, right? We turn our attention towards it, right? And if we look around, ourselves, normally, right? We're, if I say, okay, the image of me you have right now, where is it in your experience, right? You can kind of circle it. Oh, it's like pretty clear. Oh, this image is right here. Or if I say, what exactly is the sound of my voice? You can't circle the sound of a voice, but you can kind of mentally isolate it. Like, okay, it's this thing. This thing is the sound of the voice. Similarly, we are trying to localize in the same way this intuitive sense we have of being. Like, what is that? What exactly? We're trying to find it. What exactly is this? And again, we always revisit the fact that it's in our experience. We're somehow experiencing this fact. We know it. So we're not looking for something elsewhere. We're looking for us as we experience ourselves now. So I want you to try to turn your mind towards yourself and try to see where your mind goes, right? Where does it go when you are looking for I, for yourself? And the cardinal rule is, wherever your mind goes, ask yourself, it can be a verbal question, doesn't have to be a verbal question, but ask yourself, is this something of which I am aware? If it is something of which you are aware, then it is not you. And then you have to then ask yourself again, who is aware of this? Who is aware of this now? I mean, it's really the same question. You start with, looking for I, and then you ask who is aware of whatever it is. You're really coming back to the basic question again and again. And the basic question again and again and again is back to your experience of I, of you, right? And to recall as well that what you're looking for is not something else, but the looker. You're looking for the looker. You're looking for you. The one who's looking for you, you're looking for that person, you. So with that in mind, these preliminary instructions, sorry, what's, sorry,
It's 2116.
2116, great, sorry, great, thanks. Okay, so I'm gonna set a 5-minute timer, and we'll start with that, and we'll do 5 minutes together, and then we'll talk about it. And because I think it's very helpful to see where your mind goes and discuss it, and then we'll do it again, and maybe again, and then maybe we'll do some surrender, we'll see. So let's start there, 5 minutes right now. All right. Anyone want to discuss where their mind went?
I thought I one and the same with the universe kind of a thought came.
That thought came.
came.
Okay. And then what did you do?
Continue to live on that, and then some mundane things like going on came. Then I had to go past that. I had to go above, and I refocused it.
And how did you refocus? What did you refocus on?
I am like everything is me. Only everything else, everything around is like the tree or everything is one and the same kind of a thought. I refocused.
So even that thought, which is a good thought, of course, that everything, that you are one and the same with everything, right? What you want to do is recognize this is a thought.
Yeah.
This is a thought that's occurring to me, right?
Yeah.
So you're hunting for, to whom is that thought occurring? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So no matter what, see, it's a good example, right? You have two highly different kinds of thoughts. One is a spiritual thought that I'm one with everything, and another mundane thoughts.
Yeah.
Both are thoughts, and both are opportunities to look at, to turn your attention from the object to the subject, which is I. Where is I, the one who's experiencing both kinds of thoughts, right? Because it's not necessarily about favoring a spiritual thought over a mundane thought, but rather both are objects. Where am I in this picture? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what you're hunting for. So to turn back again and again and again to whatever's happening, not to be distracted, because in a way it's like you're talking to a friend and you want to ask them about something, but they don't really want to talk about it. So they try to distract you, but they like change the topic. Like, let's talk about the weather. Let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about school. Let's talk about anything but the topic you want to talk about. Let's talk about that, and you have to be like dogged in your pursuit. No. Let's go back to this topic. Let's go back to this topic again. And the topic is me. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Right? Really, this is a lot of the inquiry to recognize the dilemma. Right? Here we are, the most obvious thing in our entire life, which is the sense of our own existence. And yet, when we look for it, suddenly we don't quite know what it is, right? That is the strange thing. How can something be so basic, yet when we look for it, suddenly it's confusing? That's the nature of the issue.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I had the funny thought because as I closed, as the thought, what you have talked, looking for that, who is going, it's like I was playing hide and seek.
Yes.
It was funny, but that was the first thought which came. And then as she said, again, mundane things came. And then again, the question comes, why am I thinking that when I'm supposed to do this? So I'm again questioning myself. And the experience was that it is distracting me from that question.
Yes, exactly.
And I could see how glimpses of how it is trying to distract.
Exactly. Yes.
Because this other thought is trying to push for that answer, but this mind is trying to
move away from
I
it.
think the way you explained now makes sense why the thoughts were.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the content of your thoughts in these exercises can be interesting too, because they do reveal to some extent or the other some of the structure of your attachments. Again, this is why it's also important to attempt this in daily life as you're working, cooking, talking to people, no matter what it is, trying this. And the places where it's harder, the places where you forget, the places where you can't maintain it, those are the structure of your attachments. The place of your attachments, meaning the places where, you feel like, okay, it's important that I act in the situation, that I do the situation. That's where it's going to be difficult to maintain this inquiry, because inquiry is precisely going to make it difficult for you to act in the normal way as quote unquote doer, essentially. Also going to ask, if you're looking for, the typical question is, who am I, right? But equally valid, which is the same question is, where am I? Where am I? So if you ask yourself, where am I? If you think of it that way, do any of you get a sense of where you are, perhaps? Anyone want to chime in? Or if anyone has any other experiences they want to share, period, I'm curious.
Yeah, Akhilesh, I have a question. I mean, I want to share what I feel.
Sure.
Pardon me if it is a very silly question out of my ignorance. When I try to make an inquiry, okay, every thought comes with the identification with something or someone, okay?
Okay.
Any thought that comes, okay? But the moment I try to peel off those attachments for the identification of myself, there seems to be nothing, okay? There seems to be okay, if any thought, like anything, the initiation and the process of continuation of the thought is always with something or someone.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but even if we think that, okay, yeah, but finally, we know that it's not me with that attachment, there remains nothing about I, okay? So but like you said earlier, even though that makes nothing, but there exists something I. How that confusion, or it feels like there is, for sure, theoretically there is something I, but when it's practically, when with the thought process and thoughts always makes attachment of that I with something as a someone, how to peel off that detachment, how to realize that real I without these things, attachment of these things are these people around us.
So if you're looking for yourself and you come to what seems, so when you're looking for yourself, right, right, certainly when a thought occurs, like you say, there's clearly a very clear feeling of I. But if those thoughts seem to be to fade away for a moment, and it seems like there's quote unquote no thoughts, and that's the so-called nothing, right? It's your responsibility to notice, I am noticing this nothing, this so-called nothing. I am here, present to this nothing. So you have to recall yourself to that fact. So where is the I who is observing this nothing, the observer, the one who's aware of the so-called nothing? Because if you were not aware of the nothing, then you wouldn't know enough to be able to say there's nothing. Does that make sense? So the nothing is, so you're there observing the nothing. So you have to bring yourself back to this fact and then try to find yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I understand with respect to the what's going, the drama, when I become an observer, I know that is what I am observing, the ongoing drama of the thoughts. But how I know the knower, for example, you say okay, now I'm aware that I am not part of that things and the people, okay? What are the thoughts? Or now that awareness is there, but who is observing that I?
Yes. Well, you're looking for that.
Pardon?
You're looking for that. So you have the sense that I'm observing, and you want to know, how do I know that knower? Well, the answer is you have to look for that sense by which you know that you say, I'm observing. I know that I'm observer. You know that I'm the observer. How do you know that? Whatever that sense is, that knowledge is, that light, there's a light shining by which that this all seems to be known. You need to find what that light is by looking. See, the point is, I know I am the observer. That knowledge is already being experienced by you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to say that. So you have to start examining your own experience and find how it is that you seem to know that.
Yeah.
Right? You yourself are saying, I'm an observer. What does that mean? What does it mean to you? That's the question. you already have an implicit understanding of what it means. Otherwise, you wouldn't say it. So you have to look within to say, well, what exactly, when I say I'm the observer, means I and observation. Those are the two things. Observation is pretty clear what that is. But the I part of it, that is so-called observing, where is it? Where is it? Where am I? Another way of looking at this, when I say where am I, is, you think about it, right? If you're looking at anything, you're looking at a valley, you're looking at a mountain, you don't look at it from no place. You're looking at it from someplace. You sit here, you sit there, you stand here, you stand there. There's always an angle because you're someplace. So where are you sitting as the observer? Where is your seat? It's the same question again.
Yeah.
So you're trying to look within your own experience and say, I know I'm here somewhere. Where? Because I seem to know that I'm here. Like, that's very stupid. I seem to know I'm here. Where's here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, like, maybe like in my science and engineering mind, looking for some coordinates, but seems to be like, it is everywhere and nowhere. Okay, like even though I'm aware that I am somewhere, but to get a tangible answer, it feels like nowhere but everywhere.
Yeah.
But
so that's an interesting thought. This is the thought that kind of comes up. So one of the many thoughts that can come up during inquiry. So yes, in a way that's absolutely correct. But at the same time, we want to again note, it's everywhere and nowhere is a concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's occurring to you. So you have to say, okay, this is not an answer to the question. This is actually another idea. And so this idea is occurring to me. Again, so you have to kind of be dogged and say, no, this is not an answer. Even though it's accurate in some sense, it's not accurate enough because it's not actually an answer to the question. So all kinds of thoughts, right? So you notice you've mentioned two very prominent thoughts that often occur. One is, well, when there's no thoughts, there's nothing there, but there is something there because you're observing the nothing. Or it's everywhere and nowhere, which is, of course, scriptures have taught us, but that's not really an answer either. That's another thought. So to note these as they arise, and then just redirect attention. No. Who's observing these thoughts? Yeah. Let's try again. Another 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see if I can get this to work again.
2116.
Got it. Thank you. All right, here we go. All right. I want to share their experience.
I find myself observing my breath and observing the abdomen heaving. Then I try to ask myself, who is having the thought that my breath is rhythmic, so on. And then I'm unable to pinpoint where that who is. And then I keep adding layer upon layer to the same question. Who's having the thought that he's unable to determine where that breath is coming from? And I keep adding layers upon layers on it. It becomes an infinite loop. I don't know how to break out of it.
No, that's fine. You just keep going. Just keep going. You know, you can view it as layers and layers, or you can view it as really just returning to the first question. You know, because if you add layers, and it feels like a loop, but really what's happening is you're just returning to the basic question again and again and again. I is where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Right? You can say, who's aware of this thought, and who's aware of the thought, that who's aware of this thought, and so on and so on. Like you're saying, that's a way of looking at it. I mean, it's fine, you know. But just to recognize that really what you're doing is just returning to the same basic thing over and over and over and over and over again. You know. So you're chasing it, and you can't pinpoint it. You know, that's fine. So it's perfectly normal. Just a note, right? Like you say, you did it exactly right. You know, I can't pinpoint it. Well, who's having this thought that I can't pinpoint it? Exactly right. That sense of being unable to pinpoint it is being observed by you. So yeah, exactly. So that's exactly the right process. You just keep hunting. You just keep hunting and hunting and hunting. There's a series of objects that will occur. And the point is the process of continuous trying and trying and trying. That's what builds the concentration. And as you do it in daily life, that's what will dissolve the attachments. And ultimately, that's what will lay the ground for, a breakthrough, basically.
In the process, there is some anxiety which grew up when I was trying to question that who is getting these thoughts. I could feel like glimpses of those, that somebody, that anxiety.
Interesting. So, you know, do you get a sense of what the anxiety was about at all?
Like I'm chasing and it's evading.
And it's evading. Yes. Well, yes. So this is a self-inquiry is, can be a frustrating game that way.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a game and it can be a frustrating game. And so it's perfectly normal to have that anxiety. You know, totally normal. Yes.
And I could.
I'd like to.
Anxiety.
You can observe, great. And so
Which I never did before.
well, that's fantastic. And the more you observe it, the less identified you'll be with it. Because as the anxiety arises, as soon as you notice it, you want to essentially ask, to whom is this anxiety occurring? It's another object that's occurring, it's arising.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a couple of things to that train of thought. So first for me, and I know the recommendation is not to close my eyes, but force of habit, I had my eyes closed. So there's a clock here that the ticking of the clock got magnified so loudly, and so then I was kind of chasing that, okay, who's getting irritated with this magnification and so on. And then then other thoughts started coming, but then at the end I realized, oh my god, this chasing is so hard. I'd rather give my mind something to hold on to, in which case I kind of, then I had to ask myself, so who's instructing, who's coming up with this idea that, you have to give the mind something to hold on to. So I did notice a sense of exhaustion of chasing that whole thing. And it was easier to just anchor the mind on something.
Exactly. No, exactly. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And so as you notice, exactly, sense of exhaustion, again, to whom is a sense of exhaustion occurring, right? Because again, right, a sense of exhaustion, what happens is we identify with it, right? That's why it feels like I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted at this game. The question is, who is, am I really the one? Where is this, that as soon as you see that you don't know exactly who this I is that's supposedly exhausted, right? Exhaustion becomes neutralized in that process. I'm not going to say it's easy for that to happen all the time, but that's the basic idea, right? All these negative emotions that could arise, like fear, anxiety, exhaustion, etc., You just
Worry.
feed that right back in.
Worry.
Yeah, worry, anything that arises, because the reason those things bother us is precisely because we believe that I am conditioned by that.
Yeah,
Condition.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was trying to chase, and then because like what a lot of things read, a lot of things told, and all those answers from those, for example, all the
society,
scriptures,
Uh-huh,
all the things,
uh-huh,
all the
uh-huh.
things, knowledge that we have,
Uh-huh.
those are all coming as an answers to
Yes.
my eye.
Yes.
And because we have been told, everything, and then suddenly my current worry comes. Then I said, okay, this worry I'm not bothered. I'm leaving it to let the nature handle. I am leaving it, and I am surrendering myself, and let that happen. Whatever happens, I'm okay with it. Then move back to the again. And then I went. Then again, the scriptures things come.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that means it's a built-up knowledge with scriptures or
digested,
other
yeah.
things, and chanting. Everything comes in place.
Exactly. No.
And but then I said, what do I? Sometimes I feel some intuition. Is that me? Or like is the intuition? Or sometimes some guidance comes. Is that me? Like what I feel rather than what the scriptures or anything.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, I think you bring up several interesting points. One is, Maharishi says, just like a family person who's pursuing the spiritual path has to detach themselves from their family in some ways, not necessarily physically, but mentally. In the same way, those who have learned the scriptures have a family of texts inside them from which they have to
Definitions.
detach themselves
Definitions
ultimately.
and-
Definitions and all these ideas, because what happens is those are helpful to a point, but then they become obstacles
Yes.
eventually,
Yes.
because they need to prevent you from seeing yourself. And then you said, okay, so those are clearly thoughts, but what about intuitions? Is this intuition me? Is it intuition me? I will say, right, that may be closer, but still, those are things you're experiencing, right? Anything you're feeling is an experience. So immediately you have to say, who's experiencing it? And notice, whatever intuition is there, I am experiencing it. So therefore, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's not me. So where is the one who's experiencing this intuition? That's always the question. That's always the question. Maybe closer, don't get me wrong. Intuition is definitely closer because we're moving towards our own experience rather than pre-digested answers.
Yes, that's what I wanted to do.
Yes.
I don't want any preconceived notion or
Yes.
somebody's told that, not
Yes.
that way. And I just, I left it to some dates or something, like things fall on its own. I said, I am not even going to bother. And several people did for me things. I mean, I experienced that I didn't even expect things were happening because it got kindled in several people's mind and several people doing. And then I said, I didn't even do any effort, but things are happening.
Mhm.
That feeling, then I realized, okay, there is no point in me getting worked up about doing this. Like I did not get worried about, okay, I am not going to bother. I did my effort, that's it. And at that moment, several people were calling me, several people were doing it. And I just, how things are moving. And I was looking and observing that moving.
This is the past, right?
Not in the
Or in your mind just now?
not
Or
yet, not
you were
just
remembering these
just
occasions?
a few days ago, just say.
Sure.
Just
So, I mean, one way of looking at, so absolutely, you can remember, that can be an aid to inquiry in that moment, right? That when something's bothering you, that, things have worked out in a certain way in the past. But also I would say, right, in the moment, as you're inquiring, as these thoughts are arising of like, oh yeah, how I'm going to deal with this, right? This worry, you said worry is arising.
Yeah, worry.
Right? To say, again, who is experiencing the worry? Because that's the key question,
Yeah.
right? The reason the worry bothers you, even as an emotion, is because you believe you're the worrier.
Yes.
And we're trying to figure out, or first of all, show, you don't know who the worrier is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
I was
That's-
telling. Yeah.
That's the key point. You see, so it's as if you're, looking over somebody's shoulder,
Yes.
that person is worrying,
Yes,
right? If
correct.
you think you're that person, then then it becomes agitating. That's the
Agitating,
issue, right?
yes.
The issue is who are you in this situation, in this
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, yes, correct.
So try to keep your eye on that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, anytime these emotions, these bothersome emotions arise, there are opportunities to say, but am I the one who's bothered? Where am I in this situation? That's the key question.
Yeah,
Because why do I care if somebody else is bothered? I care if I'm bothered, but where am I? Right? It's only because you do not look at where am I at that moment that it then feels like I'm this.
Yes.
I am this worry. I am the worry. Because there's a second level, which you say, we can think about how to like disable the worry. That's useful. But I want to say, even if the worry is there, even if you feel the anxiety or the exhaustion or the frustration, you don't necessarily even have to reason your way out of that. Even if it's there, the question is, who cares if it's there? It only bothers you if I'm the one. If that's me. But am I? Where am I? Where am I actually? The moment you look for yourself, then you're like, well, I'm not sure. And then in that moment, that emotion gets weakened.
yes.
So, okay. So since people have mentioned frustration and exhaustion, I want to say one thing that can be really helpful. And so maybe we'll move to this right now is, there is a path of inquiry and there's the path of surrender. And, a lot of people mix them, and that's perfectly fine, because the truth is they're sides of a coin. You can go back and forth between them. And what can be helpful, especially if you are trying to do this all the time, is that you go back and forth, because as you do inquiry for a while, maybe you get frustrated and exhausted. Even though I say feed that into the process, nevertheless, you may feel at a certain point, okay, I've hit a certain barrier, I can't do this anymore. At that point, it can be very, very useful to do surrender, because that feels calming,
Yes.
refreshing, easier in a way. And then at a certain point, you do surrender for a long time and you feel, okay, this is boring, quote unquote. If it's boring, which is, which is itself a thought that should be surrendered, ideally, but nevertheless, then you can bring an inquiry who's bored, so you can go back and forth and, play this game. And speaking of games, so I want to go into surrender now, and we'll do a little bit of this, and I want to do it via a little game. Which I think will also be is kind of, surrender and inquiry in a way. So the game is this: if you ignore everything right now, so if you ignore everything, because remember my sort of instruction for surrender is essentially ignore all thought or ignore everything, and refuse to use your personal willpower on anything except the practice of surrender itself, right? So if you right now just ignore everything, the question is, what remains? What remains? Anyone have any possible answers?
But
So
who
you
is
mean-
ignoring here? Who is ignoring here?
Well,
Bec-
so that's a separate question. So we're not looking at that exact point right now. Whoever you are, you are going to ignore everything right now. And the question is, what remains then? If you ignore everything, what remains?
Silence.
Okay,
And
silence.
Other
answers?
alertness.
Alertness. Okay. Anyone else?
No anxiety, maybe.
No anxiety, possibly. So
I
so
think
note all
if
of
we
these
ignore
answers, right?
everything, it
Silence.
remains I. If we ignore everything, it remains I, because I am ignoring everything and I'm aware that I am ignoring everything. So it remains I. But again, that comes to the basic question of me, like, who is being aware that I am ignoring?
Okay, yeah. So that's an inquiry question again. That's an inquiry, which is fine. We can go there, but if we just stay in this framework for a moment, right? I just want to point out all of these answers, right? Silence, no anxiety, alertness, even I, right?
I'm so worried about some problem means that mitigates.
Well, right. So
That's
it mitigates
Yeah.
the worry. Yes. But I'm asking. So I'm asking you. So when you ignore everything, what remains? And these are the answers. And I want you to note all of these answers are thoughts.
Mm.
They're all thoughts.
Yes.
So if you ignore all of those thoughts, all of them. Now what remains?
Weekend thoughts.
No, but that's a thought too. So
Yeah,
now
okay.
ignore that thought.
Yeah.
Ignore that thought. Now what remains?
Does the fear come? Because we don't know the unknown.
Oh, so fear might come. Okay, that's a thought. Ignore it as well. Now what? Now what remains?
That will be a hard one. because
Just do
it's
it right
an
now.
unknown.
Just
Right
like
now. Right now.
vacuum. It's a
Nothing.
emptiness.
A vacuum, emptiness, also a thought. Ignore that.
We didn't go beyond that.
We're just,
No,
just
I-
ignoring. Just ignore. Right. So when I say ignore, I mean this is a thought. Just dismiss it. Right. So now, if you're taking your attention away from that, what remains after that?
Nothing. Nothing
Nothing's a
remains.
thought.
No,
Nothing's a
no,
thought.
no,
Right.
no, it is, I mean, I'm not talking about the nothing as the thought, but as an observer as the thought. The reason is, I mean, my understanding is every thought is based on some knowledge, either the past or future, fear or like, past experience. Without those knowledge base, there will not be any thought, because thought needs some material to build on. Okay. The moment we think that there is, we ignore everything, that means we are ignoring the past knowledge as well as the future fears or anxiety. That means we remain in a state where there is nothing. I'm not talking about from the thought process, but I'm telling about the from observation process. There is nothing exists at that moment. At that moment.
But what I'm trying to explain is the explanation you've just given is in fact one big thought. So if you ignore that entire process of thinking, you've just given me a long reasoning chain. So you just ignore that. So now what remains?
Silence.
I think if I think it
Silence.
reminds alignment. You become one, then there is no thought. Okay.
That's another thought.
Another thought.
That's another thought. You see, these are all thoughts. So ignore all of them.
Akhilesh, silence.
Silence is also a thought.
Emptiness, vacuum.
Vacuums, emptiness, thoughts. Those are thoughts.
And all I'm just observing like that. Nothing.
Nothing.
Sunya,
Yeah,
sunya.
nothing is a thought. Nothing is a thought. It's a thought. Right? Because you're observing it, assessing it, and calling it nothing. Now
But
it's a thought,
feeling
right?
happiness. That's it.
That's also a thought.
Current problem is solved kind of a thought.
Relief.
So these are all. So if you ignore all of these thoughts, what remains then?
Awareness.
That's also a thought.
You are minutely observing the surrounding.
That's a thought.
Only you feel the breath.
That's just again a thought. Perception or a thought,
Yeah,
right?
but-
So ignore it.
Quieter and quieter. Mind is quieter and quieter.
And if you ignore that, we're looking for what remains when you ignore all of that.
Even though it might sounds like a thought, but remains oneness.
Yeah, well, again, yeah, that is a thought. That is definitely a thought.
Yeah.
Or feeling the oneness, not even thinking that is oneness.
Feeling is also a thought, equally a thought. See, feelings not a thought. Feeling is thought.
Yeah, but you are not telling others, or you are not uh, explaining the concept,
It
but
doesn't matter.
you are really.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's still a thought.
So it looks like even the observation mode itself is a thought of I rather than nothing, that nothing exists actually. Because when we say that I, I am observing based on what we discussed so far, it is a thought of I, the bigger I. So only we are trying to separate that I from the smaller I. So there always exists one thought, that one thought is this observing.
This is
Even the observing
is-
thought goes on.
this is again like you can see, right, the huge influence of
I did.
these spiritual concepts, right? So this whole chain of logic is just for our purposes, just for this moment, right? We're playing this particular limited game right now. Ignore all of that. Ignore all of that. I'll come back to it later. But what I want you to do is ignore all of these thoughts and see what remains. Don't try to think about what remains. If you try to think about what remains, that's a thought. So I want you to ignore all of your thoughts and see what remains. And tell me what remains.
We're able to reach that stage. I doesn't.
No.
It will not.
Just ignore. Then tell me what done. See, we're not trying to reach a stage. I'm not asking you to
No,
reach any
no.
stage. I just want you to ignore everything and then tell me what is there, what's left.
Even the observing
the
feeling is gone.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's another thought. So ignore all of these thoughts.
But the fact that we have to articulate what remains makes it a thought.
You're on the right track. Sure. Yes. But even if you didn't articulate it, actually, then what?
I exist.
That's still a thought. It's still a thought.
That's still a thought. Yep.
Still a thought. So what happens when you discard the tool of thinking is the question.
Yeah, you feel big emotion in your heart.
No, emotion is thought.
So
Actually, not
still a thought.
not emotion. What you feel?
Feeling is a thought.
Just like when you, like, biggest emotion when you go to a cemetery eulogy, or that kind of feeling comes inside you. Absolutely, I don't even want to talk anything, and then I feel very like shaken and no words. That kind of a feeling inside.
Okay, in the right direction, but it's still a thought. It's still a thought. It's
No,
still a thought. Even that, still a thought.
Objectively, I
Right.
mean, even though when we articulate, it looks like a thought, but when thought cease, okay, objectively nothing exists.
That's a thought. That whole idea.
No,
itself.
that's what I said. If the way I'm articulating that, it seems to be an observer who thinks that there are no thoughts. So the observer can say that nothing exists because the observer's thoughts, I mean, the observee's thoughts cease to exist. Okay, that's what the question is. If the observee's thoughts cease to exist, the observer of the observee can say that nothing exists from the observee's point of view.
But what I'm trying to say is, for our purposes right this second, that whole idea is a set of thoughts. That whole idea is a set of thoughts. And I'm asking is, what if you cease, what if you stop using your thinking tool? What happens?
All I feel
Stop.
is feeling. That's it.
So as soon as you mention this and feeling, and
Feeling.
mentioning feeling is also a thought.
Yeah.
Feeling is also a thought. Feeling is also a thought, because as soon as you say, I'm feeling something, that's going through cognition. You see? So I want to say, stop using your thinking instrument.
Yeah, I know. But what at that moment I feel, I don't care about anything, nothing happens, but I cannot even talk, and I am really
Express.
feeling so heavy
You can't, so it's
inside.
getting closer. So keep going. So tell me more. Ignoring, see, even those feelings of being unable to express, now you're try to see those. That's still way of thinking. It's still way of thinking,
Yeah, I feel just like If I'm really happy, how it feels, or if I'm really sad, no words, nothing, that kind of feeling comes to me.
Fullness.
But I'm saying those feelings, discard them as irrelevant.
Yeah,
So
not
they-
relevant.
When I'm
yeah.
asking what remains, I'm not asking about what you're feeling,
Mm.
because feeling is also in the domain of what we're trying to not care
Yeah,
about.
correct.
So all your thoughts, discard them as irrelevant. All your feelings, discard them as irrelevant. I mean, they may happen, but we're trying to say, what if I ignore all that stuff as noise, then what's left?
So when Manonacham happens, I think it is described as you are in a bliss state with as
Easy.
though, right?
You're again bringing in concepts. You see that? So if you ignore all those concepts, meaning right now, I'm not saying forever, just for our purposes now, those concepts are irrelevant. So try not to think about any of those concepts, any of them.
Context free, keen observation happens.
It's still a thought. It's still a thought. So you see how you're trying to describe what's going on.
But what
When
I
you're trying to
feel,
describe, and just articulation, right? And someone else said that too. So stop trying to think about because the whole point is the thinking process, right? Is what we're trying to not pay attention to, basically.
So it's a sort of direct experience without thought.
Even that is still a thought. So I'm asking, so if you really don't permit yourself to think about what's going on, question is what remains then?
some bliss.
It's
Can we
still
answer
thought,
that
still
question
thought.
without? Can we answer that question without thought?
That's a much closer answer. That's a much closer answer. You see, actually, someone mentioned it very, very passingly, but I want someone will have to have the courage to answer in the way that I want them to answer. What is the honest answer? That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, that.
I don't know. Bingo. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the right answer. But at least as far as we go, because you see, when you ignore everything, you don't use a thinking instrument. The thought is the instrument of normal knowing. So when you ignore thought, you cannot know in the normal way. That not knowing is the doorway to the true knowledge, which the mind can't grasp.
Then the fear comes, that's why.
Yeah, right. Then fear can
I
come to
don't
that,
know,
right?
because
Exactly.
that is something which is always puts us into fear, saying unknown.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
fear of
Exactly. Precisely because it's plunging into darkness.
yes,
Giving up normal light
yes.
that you
We
think that you
that
need.
control, and we like that control.
Yes,
And
yes,
as adults, it's even more, we are used to that.
yes,
In
yes,
control of the situation.
yes, exactly.
That's how we lived.
Exactly. So there's something, but I can't say what it is.
Yes.
I can't in any way even think what it is. That, right? That's very close, not exactly, but even I say very close, not exactly, because despite everything, we still are talking about it. We're still thinking about it. And there's therefore a trace of thought through this whole process. But this is very close to, the self, basically, you might say, quote unquote. I mean caveats. So, but this is what the essence of surrender is you are trying to discard like that,
This tires our mind.
Does it? It'll become easier with time.
But it does tire in the
Sure,
beginning.
sure, of course,
It
of
is
course.
getting
Yes,
chased after.
yes.
But
yes.
Akhilesh, here is the question. Okay, so I understand now, surrender means accepting our inability to not able to, accept the reality, like you said, okay, I know nothing. Okay, I don't know what it is. Correct. That's what when we not able to answer when the thoughtless state. But how we are going to function, okay, with this reality, with the real world. reality of the reality with the real world. Like, I mean, we cannot sit here and say like, I can ignore everything, like, because I don't want, but at the same time, the big eye has to the small eye has to function independent of the big eye. Okay. And the separation between the small eye and the big eye has to be functional. At the same time, have the awareness also that, look, I am not what this body, but the body has to respond and react, like, to the illusionary so-called real world. Okay.
Yeah, no. So look, so the truth is, right, this is the fundamental illusion. The fundamental illusion is I am a doing, experiencing subject. So it's only because you believe that illusion that this seems to be the case, that I have to negotiate the small I, and I have to live in the real world, and I have to do X, Y, and Z, and then do it with this belief and understanding. You can do that. That's karma yoga. It's fine. You can do that. That is, mentally purifying to engage in that process. But the ultimate is challenging that illusion directly. And if you follow the path of surrender, is you are not responsible for doing anything. And only we say with the exception of the practice, because the practice is going to unwind your habits of believing that you are responsible for doing things. But fundamentally, no. The truth is, you're not in charge of even one iota of any action. Things go on entirely without what you think you are. What you think you are is a fiction, basically. And so, if you want to, of course, it seems like you're not a fiction. That's why it's an illusion. You see, there's an illusion that I am inhabiting this body, that I'm in control, that I have to negotiate my attention, that I. You see, that I is an extraordinarily subtle misconception, a misleading magic of sorts. It seems so compelling. It's like, how could anyone not see this to be the case?
Yeah.
But then as soon as you do inquiry or surrender, suddenly surrender is more, again, it's not really about, it has an implicit element of inquiry in it, as we just saw in a way. But it is a little bit more based on faith. Like, I don't care. I'm giving it up. I'm giving it all up. Right. But yeah, the idea that you have to negotiate with the world is based on ideas of doership, basically, and we're trying to challenge those.
Yeah,
That needs a lot of courage.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And so,
the challenge.
yes,
The norm of the world.
yes, absolutely. It does require courage. I mean, that's why the inquiry has the advantage of saying, okay, who is it? It's trying to point out, right? There's a gaping hole in our understanding of things, right? So the reason it feels so threatening is precisely because we are not examining who I is, basically, right? So we identify with this kind of amorphous mass of like preconceived stuff that's like me, quote unquote. And that's why it's threatening to do this, right? Precisely. As soon as you start looking and you're like, well, who exactly is frightened? I don't know, right? That just starts to disable it, right? Surrender in a way requires, you could say it requires more courage in a sense, because it's not investigating it in exactly the same way that self-inquiry is. But it does appeal, surrender appeals to a lot of people because there's a less, less of a thrust, you might say it's less of a chasing game. I mean, the truth of the matter is it's actually very similar. If you just saw it in our little ignoring game, there is a layer, there's a layer, it's just like it. They're really very, very similar in the end. They're identical in the end, I should say. They only diverge a little bit at the beginning. But they're different flavors. But we are directly challenging. We're directly challenging both inquiry and surrender, our usual way of being in the world.
Yes.
And so it is scary. Yes.
But who is surrendering to whom? Who is surrendering to whom? Like here.
That question is it will only be answered at the end of the process. So if you want to do inquiry, then you ask that question. Who's doing the inquiry? That is inquiry. That is the inquiry. And if you're following surrender, you are basically just in this process of ignoring. And ultimately, you don't necessarily have to conceive of it as surrendering to someone, but the point is what you're doing is you're ignoring and you are trying to turn your attention away from the changing elements, basically. And even to revoke your attention from,
No, the reason I asked that.
Who is
Sorry.
ignoring would need to be ignored, right?
Who is ignoring? Yeah. I mean, so if you say who is ignoring, then you're kind of like there's like a hybrid surrender / inquiry question. You could say you can do that. You could say that. I mean, or you can ignore it. You have two choices, right? So if you're following surrender, at a certain point, you can, if you want, turn it towards inquiry and say, well, who's surrendering? Or you can stay pure surrender and say that's just a thought. Who cares? Ignore. You have both options are available to you.
Yeah.
So you can go either way.
I mean, the
using
reason I
surrender
asked the
to-
question is, surrender itself is an emotion, okay? Surrender itself is an emotion, okay? And from whose point of that emotion is the question, like, whether a bigger I or smaller I, okay? Who is surrendering? That's what I'm.
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't exactly call surrender an emotion. I would call it a practice, right? A practice, because emotion is one of the things that we're trying to ignore, but this question of who the surrenderer is and the relationship to the quote unquote big I will only be resolved through the very process of surrender.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was using surrender to say I'm focusing on the self-inquiry, and I use surrender to any distraction. So that way,
Perfect.
that goes away.
Sure.
Who cares? I am not this.
Sure, you can do
Just
that.
go.
You can do
I'm
that.
surrendered. Let
You can do
that
that.
handle, nature handle kind of it.
Sure. You can do that. You can do that. The point is, either way, to keep to the basic thing we're trying to do is to keep up one or the other of these practices all the time, to keep the vigilance up. We're trying to stay in that sort of awakeness, right? Awakeness is not being lost in anything particular. Any specific thing, we don't want to have our attention lost in it. We want to keep drawing back our attention away from the anything particular, back, away from particularity. That's the basic idea. Continuously, again and again and again and again and again.
So it's a new way of reevaluating our parameters in life. Or?
Yeah, sure, you could say so. I mean, it's a new way of being, in a
Yes,
way, a new way of living, And the truth of the matter is, of course, ultimately the truth of the matter is that, again, the idea that we are caught in an illusion at all is an illusion. The illusion is an illusion. There's no illusion, actually. So there's something very, very strange going on. It's as if like you think you're drowning, but actually you're not drowning. There's just a delusion that you're drowning. It's something like that, right? But how do you cut through the delusion? Well, by really looking at the facts, essentially, that's what's happening. The truth of the matter is, even the idea that you're drowning, even that delusion is also a delusion. So there's layers and layers of delusion, and the delusions go on endlessly. And in that sense, there's no delusion at all. Something very, very strange is going on here. It's something very, very uncapturable by the mind, because if you examine it, it's like never was. So the sense of strangeness, there is a sense of strangeness. Our normal world is not at all what it seems to be, and the sort of weak point of the magician's trick, is the I. And we're getting to it one way or the other. With inquiry, you get to it directly, and again, with surrender, you get to it indirectly, a little bit indirectly, by ignoring the particular. You ignore the particular, you move towards I. So you ignore the objects, you move towards the subject. If you turn your attention away from the objects, you automatically must be turning it in the direction of the subject. That's how it works. Just like when you ignore everything, right? Again, ignore. Trying to drop the mind. That's what's happening. You're trying to stop using the mind. The mind is an instrument. The mind is an instrument, but we've become accustomed to believing that the mind is the world. Like it is everything. Everything is defined by the mind, and what the mind can grasp is everything. But That's not true. There's something within which the mind rests, which the mind cannot grasp, and which grasps the mind.
Is not.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that. In order for that to shine, the grasping action, the mind has to cease. Basically.
So Akhilesh, one question
Yeah.
regarding the actual technique of inquiry.
Yeah.
I feel that the inquiry becomes shallow if I don't give it some space after asking the question and resting and reposing in silence. Is that sort of, is there some recommendation there?
Yeah, if you feel that way, you can give it a moment and see where your attention goes. That's totally fine. Yeah.
As of waiting for a response in silence.
You can wait for a response and then you can notice, okay, whatever this response is, including silence, is something I notice and go back. No, absolutely.
Notice the silence.
Yes, exactly. And these little things, are intuitive things that everyone has to discover for themselves to some extent. There's a kind of path, though we give the general instructions, the exact path is always discovered by each person for themselves. As you do the practice, you'll find, oh yeah, this kind of works. Because that's the power of these techniques, because they're not like a usual meditation where, oh, there's a single particular thing I'm focusing on. It's not a particular thing, you see. That's the whole beauty of it. What's happening is it's breaking up your understanding of things at all, and so because it's something which, as you look for it, what it seems to be changes, and that's the process. That's the process that leads you towards the thing, towards the truth, I should say, whatever that is. Other questions? See where we are. Well, okay, so I think we'll call it for today, and we'll talk tomorrow. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akhilesh. Really great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it becomes a new way of thinking.
Okay, we'll see you all today at 7:30 p.m. in Prema's house. Okay. And tomorrow meditation same time.